It is the gut of the Anfield Wrap's look at everything going on in terms of Liverpool transfers, where the picture is getting a little clearer, even if it's getting less momentous. I'm Neil Atkinson, sitting in Philadelphia for Portuguese Rob. He is back at the weekend, and we're all very excited about that as well. We've got Lewis Steele from the Mail joining us for this one, along with John Gibbons, obviously, to my left. I've got Dan Morgan as well to my right. Coming up as part of the show as well is Josh Sexton talking to Olivia Graham about her excellent podcast, The Missing Madonna, and how it's moving on to Radio 4, how swish for Olivia that is. We spent the summer, John, saying we'll understand more when we see them play. And now, I think we've seen them play, and I think especially last night's game in a number of ways, because you're coming up against a side you understand in Arsenal. In the context of transfers then, what do you think they need?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, you know, I think when he was coming in, we spent a lot of time thinking about the formation and who would sort of fit in that formation, and we've seen a lot of formations, but I'm not sure we've actually seen 4-2-3-1. Yeah, we've seen, you know, lots of sort of different, you know, types of things. Some are a necessity, some I think a bit closer to what he would sort of ideally play. But so you focus more on the style really, and I think he has got a lot of players who are capable of doing what he wants to do. I think he'd like more strikers about. I think that is sort of a certain thing. I think that's where we feel lighter in terms of who's here. But in terms of, you know, looking at it, you know, as a, you know, trying to imagine the players that play for Liverpool who aren't here yet, sort of into the systems. You know, I'll probably get pelters for this, but I can see why they're fairly relaxed about it. I can see why they think, well, actually, there's a lot here for the manager to work with. You know, when you're sort of seeing it, you know, in the flesh, and you're seeing it. It's just, for me, I think it's a little bit more of a question of a midfield. For me, I think it's you can see how important these deep line midfielders are going to be, and they're going to be more and more important to how we play. And Curtis Jones talked about it straight away, didn't they? This idea of changing the midfield from an engine room to more of facilitators, and I think that's why he's so excited, and you can understand why, because for him, you know, he feels like it suits how he plays. I think you're looking at it and thinking, well, have we got enough of those? And I think there's enough for Ipswich, but is there sort of enough for the season? So it's that type of midfield that I think you could sort of get on the ball. You know, is there enough of those, or do we need to maybe take someone out who's not necessarily, you know, suited to that to bring another in?
Lewis, I think what we're talking about here is the first thing I think is a marker, especially for anyone who buys in the middle of the park. It's technical ability. That's what he's going to be looking for more than anything else, technical ability in the middle of the park.
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially when you watch that game last night with Szoboszlai and Jones sort of deeper, there was a few times, especially in the first half, where they did sort of get caught with the back to goal a little bit, and you just need a bit more quality on the ball in there. And I'm not sure that Wataru Endo, I always feel harsh on Endo for criticising him, because he was brought in as a stopgap option. He was relatively cheap, so I feel harsh on criticising him. But I do think if Liverpool want to kick on and get past Arsenal and City this season, they do sort of need to upgrade on him. So they do. Arne Slot said in his press conference the other day, basically said it's quality over quantity this window, and I do sort of agree. There's no point in signing someone for the sake of it. But if they are to, you know, claw back them points on City this season, they do really need to go into that midfield market, I think.
I think there's still a lot of variables at play. We've still got the contracts that need sorting, which I think Liverpool will have had to have prioritised for this summer, and I'm sure there'll be some movement with them. And then, you know, you can make an argument now that there's a player in each position that has been linked with a move away. If we had Joe Gomez into that frame, we've got Endo, we've got Luis Diaz. It might be, and I've thought this for a couple of days now, it might be that one big moving part happens, and then all of a sudden 3 or 4 pieces of the puzzle fall into that place. And so, you know, I do read more into Richard Hughes's words around opportunism and how he predicted a quiet July and a busy August a little bit more deeper now, I think, and I think he was relating more to Liverpool and the wider picture than he maybe let on.
I think with it, the other thing they look like they're looking for me, Lewis, is pace. I think that, having watched them play, the pace in wide areas especially, but I'd say also arguably pace from fullback. Yeah. You get to see it on the right hand side with Bradley, less so on the left hand side with Shimikas. You get to see, for instance, what the right hand side of pace offers with Salah. even though we get to the goal last night, and I think he's actually played quite well, Carvalho just isn't quite lightning. If we're honest about it, Elliott isn't quite lightning, even though he was excellent last night in terms of his creative play. You know, I think that one of the things they will be looking for, if they're looking to add to attack, it will be pace.
Yeah, well, I actually I tweeted a picture of Richard Hughes last night in the mix zone. He was on the phone, and my phone blew up with people like, "Oh, he's ringing all these players," and I'm like, "Well, it's 3 a.m. back home for starters, lads." I'm not sure Anthony Gordon sat in Newcastle on the phone at 3 a.m. in the morning.
He'd be too happy if he was ringing him, yeah.
But yeah, I do think they need pace. What I would say on that is Cody Gakpo looked lightning at the Euros, didn't he, for Holland? And it'd be really interesting to see how he comes on under Arne Slot this season. Obviously, fellow Dutchman. I thought he was a bit in and out last season. He started the season well and then really faded and then finished it really well. So it'd be interesting to see what he does with him. And then Luis Diaz, can Arne Slot find more goal contributions to his game? Because on his day, he's excellent, but he just can't find the back of the net sometimes. And then, as you say, with Carvalho, there's obviously a lot of interest from him. We were at open training the other day, and he was the player that Slot was working most closely with. I thought, like, always in his ear. It's just whether Carvalho is quite good enough to play for this team, and when the big lads come back, I'm not overly convinced that he is. I'm not saying that they should sell him because he is still young, and I think he's got a lot of work to do. But I'm not sure. Basically, I definitely think they need more pace on the wings if they're going to challenge.
Yeah, it's an interesting one seeing that first goal last night, because from a Liverpool point of view, well, in the Klopp era, certainly, you know, pace around the back was seen as a big thing. The manager and the coaches talked about it a lot. You know, pacing behind being a key way to beat teams, to sort of get at teams and a real asset of them. And you wonder whether that'd be as big a thing for the new manager. And listen, we still don't know. But that first goal suggests that Mo Salah still certainly got his eye on that, and the players, you know, were able to sort of feed him. And that was very much, you know, a goal that you could imagine that the last team scored, and maybe that's not too far-fetched because it's similar players, obviously, but well, very much the same ones. But I think that was sort of an interesting marker of, okay, well, some things might be different, but we still will be sort of looking to do that, and then that feeds into, you know, the other forwards that we've got as well, who were all, maybe with the exception of Gakpo, sort of capable of and enjoy sort of making that run in behind. So then it becomes a case of sort of, have you got enough of them? But for me, it's when you talk about pace in wide areas, I think it includes the full-backs, and that's where I'm jumping ahead on your agenda a bit here, Neil, sorry, but that's where it's maybe a bit of a thing with Gomez, is that they're looking at him and thinking, well, maybe the last manager really liked his versatility, but maybe they don't see him playing full-back, because you look at I've really enjoyed seeing, you know, a lot of overlapping runs by full-backs and things like that. You've seen it from Bradley in particular, you know, sort of getting him around the back often, sort of, you know, getting him behind the cut-back crosses. We didn't see huge amounts of that towards the back end. You know, you think about a lot of our crosses from the fullback sort of came in from deep, really, and obviously Trent ends up really, really central, but they seemed, I was going to say old-fashioned, then it's not sort of quite old-fashioned, really. Cause
there's overlapping as well. There's overlapping, but there's hitting the byline, is what you say. They hit the byline wherever they are.
Yeah, and also an old-fashioned right-back just didn't move. So that's real sort of old-fashioned. But I think it was, you know, you see that, and then you think, well, it obviously suits Conor Bradley. You can see him sort of doing it. It suits Tamikis. I think he's been enjoying it. You know, Andy Robertson will run up and down for you all day, and, you know, Trent can sort of pretty much do anything. So if they're looking at it thinking, well, you know, actually now we see more Gomez as a centre half, and we don't think, you know, he can do a solid job at full back, but they'd almost maybe rather, you know, if it was an emergency, give Stevenson a go, or Owen Beck a go, you know, depending on the side, you have someone who's going to be able to play in a similar sort of way. So then he goes from a versatile defender to just a centre back. I think they love Quansah, don't they? They do really, really like Quansah. I think he's jumped ahead of him hasn't he, in terms of a centre half option, and then you've got Virgil and Canate, and yeah, you'll say there'll be injuries and stuff like that, but I was a bit surprised when I first heard that they might have been willing to let Joe Gomez go. But then when you look at it in that way, how I've sort of painted it there, it's 45 million for your fourth choice centre back, and it's not bad.
The idea on Gomez, Lewis, that he himself might almost be open to it, could well be this idea that he just wants to get regular games at centre back. it's interesting when they go away with England. When we were all in the press conference, and I mean this with the greatest of love and respect to him, because I think he's incredible with Curtis, and when he's being asked the question about can he kick on for international duty, I felt every fibre of his being was like, lads, I've done training with them and I think they're better. I think I'm better. And you could just sort of see it coming out of him because he's Curtis Jones and that's what he's about. I wonder if Gomez there, he's gone away with England and he might well have looked at it and gone, I can do this. I'm going away, and he doesn't even get on in the end. But I just sort of wonder whether or not he gets to see what everyone else is doing there, and is a bit like, well, I'm more than good enough to play. Not to say that he's desperate to play for England, more just the idea that he's desperate to play in what he sees as his natural position on a regular basis. And I wonder why that's why he may well have been open to the transfer as much as anything else. Because I thought that was one of the most interesting things about the story.
Yeah, well, to be honest, you got to put yourself in Joe Gomez's shoes. He's been here 9 years, 10 years now. He's 27. He's never really nailed down a week in, week out spot apart from that one season. Obviously injuries have played the part in that, but you've got to think, if you're him, do I want to spend my career being a fringe player in and out of the team? And you probably think, nah, not really. I want to go and play every week and challenge for whatever he can do. If he's playing for Newcastle every week, he's got a very good chance of getting in that England squad, which it sounds like he's very keen to do. So if I was him, especially if he's sort of been offered to Newcastle, you might think it might be time to move on. Klopp's left. He might see it as a new start. Can he leave? So you wouldn't blame Joe Gomez if he did want to leave. And then if he is a centre-back, I think he's fourth choice, isn't he? Kwanzaa, for me, is just absolutely excellent. Every time I watch him, I think he gets better. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's the number 2 centre-half this season.
You impressed with him when you spoke to him last night, Lewis? I know you got a bit of a way with him after the game.
He's a class act, isn't he? He's really down to earth fella. And I sort of asked him, like this time last year, you were one of the kids really that no one knew that much about, and now he's like getting stopped in the street. He said he don't get imposter syndrome at all. He thinks he's ready, and I think he's just class. Like everyone's been saying for about this time last year, everyone was like Liverpool need a centre half, but Kwanzaa could save him 80 to 100 mil.
I think with Joe, I think there is, there's a question I've been posing for the last day, which is, objectively, remove the Anthony Gordon factor, would you take 45 million for Joe Gomez? This feels like a now or never situation in a lot of senses for Joe, I think, and I think he's such a good player to have around. He's so versatile. I think he surprised everyone last season with how well he inverted and was able to carry that role on when Trent wasn't in the side, for example, and so you get tons from keeping him in terms of assisting the squad. But Lewis has mentioned there his own aspirations. I also, as well, am inclined to think that last season was probably a bit of an anomaly for him in terms of being that injury free. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if by the end of September he's out until January, because that can happen with Joe, and we've seen it happen over the 10 years or so he's been here. So 27 years of age, stock is probably the highest it's been in a long time, value is probably the highest it's been in a long time. There might be a Liverpool factor here, which is, as an asset, that's a really good deal. That's something that we're up for and we'd entertain.
You've also talked on a couple of shows and also to me off air about the importance of balance that could come right the way through this side. Who's playing left, who's playing right. One of the things that occurs to me is that at the minute, it isn't even the idea that he's necessarily fourth choice at centre-half. It's that he's third choice in the right-hand side slot at centre-half, if you see what I mean. That Liverpool haven't got anyone who clearly looks like. It's interesting really, because Van Dijk has been so available, with the one big exception. You've had this situation where other players have played that side, but none of them have looked. I think there's a game where Konate goes to Southampton at the end of the 21-22 season, looks great, plays that side, and they rest Van Dijk really late in the campaign. It's not to say it can't be done by any of the existing players, but I do wonder whether or not, with the way Liverpool want to build and play out technically, if there's something in the back of Liverpool minds, which is they wouldn't mind having the option of someone there to alternate with Van Dijk, who's maybe left-footed and something like that. And then if that player comes in, then Gomez becomes fifth in that pecking order, third in this one, all of that sort of stuff. I wonder whether or not there's an element of that in the squad building mind.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you ultimately just expect Virgil to play every game again next season. You just do, and obviously time's becoming a factor with him, but he's so pivotal to how any Liverpool team is formed that when he's in the side, he's captain obviously, you just expect him to play the majority of games, injury permitting, and so you sort of think that, coupled with the fact that I think in the next 12 months Liverpool have got to think about buying Robertson's replacement. whether that is someone you sort of bred in over time and you sort of make that a thing in itself, that he works as an understudy to Robertson while he's finding out what that role is. So that is that whole side of that defensive area covered off, and then you've got the right side, like you say. Conor Bradley's not all of a sudden going to go back on loan. Like that ship sailed. I don't think they're going to sell him. So he is a fixture for right back, as we know, and he gives us incredible width, incredible balance, incredible energy in that side. So really, you're then left with what, right centre back, and then we've already talked about Jarell and Kanate as well has got to come back into there. I agree with you. I thought going into this summer we needed a left-sided centre-back option and maybe another left-back option, depending on what happened with Tsimikas. I'd still like to see Tsimikas go, to be honest. I still think there's a better option out there for us. I think there's someone who can give us a better output when Robertson's not playing in that position, and so you do start to wonder really, like, where it fits for Joe. And don't get me wrong, there's going to be so many games next season that invariably he'll end up playing 30 games if he's fit, minimum.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because I can understand how you get to the point where you go, well, 45 million for someone who's going to be a fourth choice centre back is good business, taking his injury record into account as well. I sort of get that, but at the end of the day, he does play a lot of games last season. Gomez, he plays a lot, and so I always worry. There's the other side of it. I worry when you're taking that many games. You've got to remember you're losing Matip as well. So how many games does Matip play? Probably 15. So suddenly your 60 appearances in the defence sort of gone really, and so I think I'd still like it. I'd probably like a defender if they could bring one in. And I said last night, if it was Gomez, you maybe need 3. I'm going to scale that back to 2. I'd had a drink, but I'm going to scale that. But I think, it's the case of so who's your fourth choice centre half, and can you get someone in for, say, sort of around half that money, for example, and you know, this brings in a Sepp van der Berg question, of course, because if you think Sepp van der Berg's a £20 million centre half, then maybe he's the person you can get in. But I think for me, I'd be looking at, you know, someone who can come in and not necessarily sort of expect to start, and that was the Yoro thing, wasn't it? They were looking to bring him in to be someone who wasn't necessarily going to start. He wants to be starting more often, and then obviously they let him go elsewhere. But I think you'd still want to be. I think you want to be buying a centre half, and I think you probably want to be buying a fullback as well, and the Robertson replacement maybe.
This is only a sell to buy thing. With Gomez, you don't sell him and don't buy, essentially, and that can come in different guises. So I expect, one of the things I'd expect to see is if you sign Anthony Gordon, for example, like if Liverpool announce in the next week that they've agreed to deal with Newcastle for Anthony Gordon, I think it'll be like a Thiago thing, where later in the day they go, oh, by the way, we've agreed a fee for this lad who plays left-sided centre-back, and it's someone around 20-30 million mark, and then maybe a week later or a week before Joe Gomez goes out, or he goes out as part of that deal. But you sell to buy is what you don't just, you know, I mean, you can imagine the internet if by the end of this summer we've got rid of 3 players and one of them's Joe Gomez and haven't signed anyone. So it has to be that you do it as part of a deal for Gordon, or you have something lined up that once you've done that deal, these pieces of the puzzle, like I mentioned before, all start falling into place.
And another one of the pieces of the puzzle, as you say there, is obviously how highly they do rate Sepp van den Berg, because he's obviously played both of these games out here in the States, and I think he's played very well in both of them. He keeps saying in the media how he feel like he's being priced out of a move, but realistically he's not really doing his chances of leaving any favours with them performances, is he? If anything, he's 25 million now. But, you know, as I was saying, Slot seems to rate him quite highly, whether that's just because there's no one else that can play there on this tour. But is he good enough to be a fourth choice centre half? He could, based on these 2 pre-season games, he is, but I'm not overly sure on that.
Or a fifth choice centre half if they replace Gomez with the lads who can do some left-sided centre half and some left back. If you see what I mean, like that idea that there's movement within there and flexibility. Because I think, Lewis, this is something, you know, we've already seen it with Szoboszlai especially, but I think we may see it with a couple of others. I think they want a bit of squad flexibility. You think about the way in which City builds a squad now. You know, there's a number of players who play in multiple positions. This way everyone says, oh, City have got tons of players. They sort of haven't really got that many players, but what they've got is a lot of players who can just take different roles on. And I wonder if, you know, when you're training like this, when you're trying to do a bit of squad building, players who can offer you more than one or two things. But the issue that Gomez has got is, if Trent's going to stay at right back, he's third choice at right back. I just said before, he's third choice at right-hand side at centre-half. And then you've got a bit of a thing where the manager may, in the fullness of time, decided if everything just stayed the same, he prefers him at left-back ahead of Shimikas, but he's still behind Robertson there. So that idea that there maybe needs to be, weirdly, this is a very odd sentence, a little bit more specialism in your flexibility, if that makes sense.
Well, it's an interesting point you make on City, because like sometimes I look at their squad on a Premier League game. They've got 2 goalkeepers on the bench. They've got 3 kids who I've never heard of. So they've got like 15 amazing players, whereas Liverpool seem to have 10 or 11 amazing players, and then loads of 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 players that are not quite at the level, but not bad enough to move on, like the sorts of like Tsimikas and these sorts of people. But yeah, it's an interesting one on the midfield, because as you mentioned there, Szoboszlai played in that sort of number 9 the other night, and then last night he was in like the number 6 role, very deep. So, and we also believe he's been trialled on the wing in training.
Well, that sounds like Bernardo Silva, though. I feel like you've just described Bernardo Silva, and that to me is what's really interesting there.
Well, Szoboszlai's got to kick on really, because he started last season amazing. I thought he's maybe even the best player in the Prem in the first 2 months of the season, or one of them. And then second half of the season, he looked like he'd never played a game of football in his life. So, but it's good that he's got this full pre-season under his belt, and hopefully he's learning Slot's ways, and he can kick on whatever position that is this season.
Gordon then, as part of this, which doesn't seem to be going anywhere, Dan. The problem is it just fits. You can just see it. You know, you can see it in the way in which they lined up last night. You could see exactly what he could offer. You could see what he could offer arguably in any of the 3 positions across the front, but especially the left-hand side. Everything suggests he's really, really eager himself. I mean, it'd be a significant outlay, but there's now a bit of a benchmarking with the price, albeit in Newcastle's time of PSR, wow. But I don't even think that's even particularly going anywhere. And if they want to continue to grow that squad, they're going to need to create PSR headroom for themselves, Newcastle. Everything to me points that this is still such a live runner and rider, and that he'd be such an asset for this Liverpool side.
Yeah, I think it's clear now he wants to move, and I think it's clear now if the move happens, it's because he's kept it alive himself by making sure that he's let every party know that he wants to move. And so, you know, I think it's probably going to be drawn out, and there'll be more of a saga to come with this, and we'll all have to sit tight and see how that unfolds. But I agree with you. I think you can still make a PSR argument to Newcastle about this. I think there's ways in which Liverpool can maybe help that. You know, if you start 4DHSing this a bit, you know, who are Newcastle's targets if they sell Gordon? Can Liverpool help them if, for example, say for instance Newcastle want to sign Semenyo from Bournemouth, and can Liverpool give someone Bournemouth on loan? Or can Liverpool give someone, you know, Benzo to the team who Bournemouth are going to sign a player from because they've just lost Semenyo? You know, there's ways in which Liverpool can try and help with this deal if it's something that is going to come to life. But I think the thing about him is, especially now that you've got a bit of evidence of watching us, and you've got obviously the body of evidence of watching us in this squad last season, he's just dribbles galore, but like effective take-ons. I think that the big criticism always levelled at Diaz is he sort of half takes a man on. So he'll beat him, he'll come back inside, he'll sort of never fully commit to beating a man, and we did see after his first season, his first 6 months with us, that his take-on productivity rate like really sort of fell off in the numbers. And so I think Gordon is he's your left-sided player who will just commit to beating his man every single time. You know, there was a reason why at Everton there was a lot made of him, how he reacted to getting fouled. Well, he was getting fouled, you know, first and foremost, not more so against us, and not getting pens a lot of the time. So
are we saying that to Penn now, are we?
Yeah, yeah.
Now it's on Andy.
Yeah. Now Andy's in and Matip's gone. No allegiances to any of them.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it, with Gordon, because you feel like, you know, in many ways Newcastle are in a strong position because they've managed to sort out the PSL issues, but also they will be conscious there's 2 years left on his deal. They will be conscious that he looks like he's had his head turned a little bit, and would, you know, would love to sort of come back to Liverpool. So they are in a position where do they say, well, do we cash out now where maybe his value is highest, or do we sit on it another year? I think
and have the player. It's worth saying. This is really good.
Have the player, and then sort of, you know, have a little bit more time to think about who you sort of want to replace him. That's the decision that they've got to make. I think I think there's a route to selling him, and I think it wouldn't be a popular one, obviously, with the fans, but I think that they're able to say, well, look, the player's he's just decided he wants to go sort of elsewhere. And
if it gets less than buy another couple of players, that's what I would say. Like, I think they've still got, if they're looking to kick on, for instance, they could do with having a more reliable cover alternative for Isak. They could probably do with now upgrading Almiron. They've got Harvey Barnes already sat there. They used in the season where they qualified for the Champions League, the left-hand side was Joe Willock and Joe Linton, if you know what I mean. So there's not, and they're both still there, and and both should be back from injury. You know, I think there's a way, if you're Newcastle, you can say almost Liverpool's need for Anthony Gordon to kick on to the next thing is almost greater than our need to retain him to do what we need to do, especially if it let us reinvest in a couple of areas given PSR pressure.
Yeah, it's
talking them into it if you're listening, by the way.
Well, no, it's interesting because when I spoke to Alex Hurst from True Faith about this, when the first story broke, he was like, listen, I'll be gutted if he goes because I love watching him as a footballer. He's been brilliant, but just like you said, actually, if you look at their top players, you know, you look at the ones who, you know, are real sort of the high flyers for us. So Isaac, Bruno and Anthony Gordon, you'd probably say that the three best players there. He's the most replaceable in terms of what they've already got. You know, so Harvey Barnes obviously plays the same position, came in for quite a large amount of money, and, you know, had his injury record problems also last year, but you don't necessarily feel like that's sort of a long-term thing. I think that he was just sort of unlucky last year, and then, you know, there's other solutions, and so I think a lot of clubs are sort of realising, and maybe this is the point where now, you know, we were talking about selling Joe Gomez there, not necessarily because we dislike Joe Gomez, it's just, well, could you, if it is 45 million, could you use that money better to improve the whole team? And that's what I think. And
it remodel the squad in the process as well a little bit.
Yeah, and I think you know, in this post PSR world, really, but also just generally, I think football clubs, you know, will start to see sort of transfers more like that, and, you know, some fans go, well, you know, why should we have to sell anyone and stuff like that? But this is just the reality. You know, obviously with Liverpool, we often go back to Coutinho, where it wasn't a player that they wanted to win. We wanted him to go, but in the end, it strengthened Liverpool because how we were able to use the money. There's no guarantees you will be able to do that. You can get, you know, a load of money in, like Spurs did for Gareth Bale, and invest it in players who look great on paper and it doesn't sort of quite work out for. So it is a little bit of a risk, but I think if you want to improve, then I think risk sometimes you do need to take. So maybe that's the way they'll sort of picture it for Liverpool. You know, I've used that word risk there. There is no such thing as a risk-free signing, but I think he feels as close as you can get for Liverpool, I think, and I think that increases his value a little bit, because you might think, you know, say he comes to Liverpool for 75 million, you're like, that's a lot of money, do you know what I mean? Is he sort of worth that? But I think where he becomes worth it is, I think we'd all be shocked if he didn't hit the ground running. We'd all be, you know, it's his big move. Your son, Rob, often says is that he wants a player's move to Liverpool to be like the biggest thing in their life, and that's what it'd be for him. You think about how made up it'd be. You think about everything he'd put on the pitch. You think about, you know, getting your peak sort of Anthony Gordon years, which is what we'd be getting. You think about, as Dan says before, how well he'd fit into the system, how well he'd fit into what we play. The fact that he gets sort of big goals. As I say, there's no such thing as a sure thing, but I think like he feels as close as possible to what that might be, which I think sort of helps you justify, you know, the fee, which would be really high, rather than someone maybe you could get for 50 million who sort of looks great, but it's got a lot more question marks.
I think there's only one man that can drive this move, and it's not Richard Hughes or Slot or Eddie Howe or anyone, it's Anthony Gordon himself. I think he has to lose a bit of face if he wants to make the move. I think he has to tarnish his reputation at Newcastle slightly. I think he has to force it through almost, because I was speaking to someone who knows Newcastle very well a week or so ago, and they were saying they're sound with PSR now. So I don't think Newcastle are in a position where they have to sell him. But as John was saying there's no point in signing a winger for the sake of it now. It has to be the perfect one, because there's so many sort of players at Liverpool who are good but not like amazing. Like we mentioned Luis Diaz a couple of times, and Cody Gakpo as well. They've both got the flaws in front of goal. Anthony Gordon seems to be the real deal, the full package, perfect age, obviously a Liverpool fan. It just makes the world of sense. But if the deal's to happen, I do think he has to go to Newcastle's hierarchy and be like, I'm really sorry, but I want to go to Liverpool this summer. And talk about like swap deals. Could Liverpool say, you know, here's Fabio Carvalho or something like that? Because if Gordon comes, let's be realistic, Carvalho's not going to get anywhere near the team on that left wing. So maybe that's something that Rich Hughes could offer them.
Could well go from there. Gordon is going to remain a topic of conversation. It's not going to go anywhere, trust me on that. Coming up right now is Josh Sexton with Olivia Graham on her podcast Missing Madonna, which starts on Radio 4 on Saturday morning. What about that?
And it is a special free show insert today. We're not just bevying here on a Monday, this is a Friday afternoon. We're bevying because we are celebrating a little bit. Also just having a nice time for AFQ, to be honest. Kev's in the background, on vibes, bevying away as well. We've all got a little one here because we are celebrating a bit, aren't we? We're celebrating the fact that Missing Madonna is going on to Radio 4. Tell us a little bit more about that, Livy.
Yeah, that's it basically, John.
Cut the camera.
And scene. Should give like the facts first and then we can get into the... I don't know, whatever else. Basically because it did so well, or it's done so well, or it's doing so well, that it's going on Radio 4, in August, every Saturday in August at 9 in the morning. So there's 5 Saturdays. So it was 9 episodes and now it's 5 every Saturday morning at 9. I feel like I've done that enough now. I'll say it again at the end.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned as well that it's done so well. Of course, last time you came and spoke to us, you were speaking to Andy and John after it hit 1 million streams. Now up for a British Podcast Award in the True Crime category as well. Can you believe really the success it's had? Because to you, even though it's a boss story, it's just your family's story, I guess. So to see the sort of mass appeal that it's had must be unreal.
Yeah. I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience at all times. Do you know what? I think I can get behind that people are like, oh, that's a mad boss story, but that people loved the way it was told so much is what I am like. What? I think, I don't know. It's hard because it wasn't expected to do as well as it did. We hit our... I think I said this last time. I think we hit our 3-month target in 5 days for listens, basically, which is it's good and bad. It's good that's amazing, and bad that they didn't expect it would do that well. And I think that's just good for podcasts and storytelling in general, that they didn't expect that a story, but with I want to say regional accent, but defo a Scouse accent, and about some Scousers and all that. I think they just didn't. For whatever reason, they didn't expect it would do as well as it did. Yeah,
and Mike, the reason Mike is here is because you needed a little bit of prodding initially to get you to share the story and to take it on to a bigger platform. Mike, this part of the reason I wanted you to be on this is to talk about Livy first and foremost, really, because she'll always be modest about this and the story and sort of what went into it, but it is a brilliant story, isn't it? It's told in a brilliant way. It involves brilliant people in terms of Livy's family and all the sort of different voices that come into it. And I know as much as I'm her mate, as your mate, it's a source of real pride for us, isn't it?
Yeah, massively so. Yeah, it's like she told me the story first time, and it was like being really shy and reserved about it, and I wasn't just being
God, sorry.
Don't worry.
Get on how good that is. By the way, because she's my mate, it was genuinely a wow. That's a mad story. Why don't people know about this more? And it's fair to say you were quite reserved.
First time ever, by the way. Yeah. First and only.
But she was like, "Oh, I don't know if it's a good story." I was like, "No, behave. It's a good story. It's yours and your family's, and even if you make it and don't put it out, it's something that you've done for your dad and your mum and your sisters, and now the new generation growing up, we'll all have that to look back onto and cherish." And as Josh says there, we've known you for a while now. It's mad to know that everyone else has got that same connection that we have from minute one.
Yeah, and that's the thing. For you, Livy, it's I think we've spoke about this in the booze before. That's why I wanted to sort of recreate this setting a little bit with the ale here.
We are going to go to the pub.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But for you, it's a little bit. It's almost like a reclamation project, I guess, isn't it? Because unfortunately, your dad is no longer with us. But this is a story that he sort of carried throughout his life. It's a boss story that involves and sort of speaks to the boss character that he was as well, and shows how full of life and full of these little tricks and mysteries he was as the Silver Fox. And obviously I implore everyone, by the way, who's not listened to it, who's watching this to go and listen to it. Because he's fucking spoiling
it. Shouldn't swear as well. Not from the curve, oh my God.
You sound, don't worry. But that must be what it feels like for you, that you've got the chance to reclaim the story now, and as Mike says, for your family, for future generations, it's out there in the world now and tells that story of your family's history.
Yeah, defo. I mean, I think that's like the best and maddest thing. I think I just thought when I made it, people would go, oh, I understand. Even our Jack, who was there when it happened and is in the podcast, after we recorded said, and we had to record loads of them because it was like, what? And afterwards he said, oh, I can't wait for it to come out so I can like fully understand it. Because it was just so mad. And it was like, and it's good that we did it with the BBC because they were like fact checking everything. But I think that's the big thing is that I just thought it would be like, oh, I sort of understand that story. But I think one of my mates, Johnny, was like, oh, you couldn't get a more Scouse story than like going up against like the establishment and the busies and having them off, do you know what I mean? And yeah, that was like, I always said I wanted to do it for that reason, to sort of like reclaim, because it was horrible at the time. But then I also said I wanted to do it because it is a boss funny story, and then in the end that was like the main thing. And it's great that Mike and Kev are here, because in particular I was just texting them all the time being like, I'm worried it's not funny enough, like is it da-da-da? And Mike once was like, Livy, Paul in Basingstoke walking his dog has got to understand it as well. Like it can't just be like gag after gag.
Well, that's the thing. It gets to be a sort of celebration for you now, and we should have done some admin off air, but I presume, can people vote in this British Podcast Award? Is it one of the judges categories or panel categories? So, but go on and give yourself for people to listen to it on BBC Radio 4.
Oh yeah.
That's,
do you know what? I just want to say one more thing about Mike as well. Why it's really great that Mike's in. He's going to die because he's going to be like, it's not about me. Basically, what happened was, so everyone's always like, why have you never told this story? And obviously because of the like, I've always thought at some point I would tell it, maybe. It's also mad that it ends up being a podcast, and it's like, how did I even end up working in podcasts? And then, anyway, when it came about, I was like, I'm actually ready for this. Do you know what I mean? Like I've been training for it. But well, no, it's not even funny because that is the truth. That's not a joke. Sorry. So basically, we was in the pub. We'd actually been for a steak dinner, hadn't we? Yeah. And we were in the pub before pre-AFQ, and so Mike went, let's have a look at some of the questions, and I was like, oh, I've never looked at the questions before. So he said, oh, there's one here. If you were stuck in a lift with Steven Spielberg, and for a minute or 3 minutes, what film would you pitch? And then and I was like, I've got like this mad story that I'd probably tell him. And then he was like, oh yeah, go. And I was like, I don't think I'd mention it on the show, but if I was really in that situation, and told Mike, and then he was like, what? He was like, are you messing? And then I was like, oh, that's not even the full hit. A few weeks before, the BBC had emailed me and said, we want to make a story about the theft and the recovery of the Madonna with the Armwinder. We believe your dad was involved to some extent. Which I was like, right. Well, actually, I flipped, obviously, and text Neil and was like, oh my God, the BBC are going to make this podcast, and like everyone lied about my dad the first time round. Like I don't want to see it happen again. And then Neil like gave me great advice, blah blah blah. But I just sat on it. I didn't do anything. And then weeks later was when I was in the pub with Mike. And I was like, yeah, the BBC have emailed me. Like Neil said to email back, tell them it's not a public interest story, blah, 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 blah. So Mike was like, email them now. But obviously a bit, I don't want to say rotten, but defo tipsy at this point. So I was like, I'm defo not going to email them now. So anyway, goes out, did an AFQ with Kev, who was fuming that we didn't take him for the steak.
Sounds about right.
And then, yeah, we were like, oh. And then went out that night. And then Kev gets in and Kev's like, it wasn't blah, 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 and blah, 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 was it? So then they're like, email. So the next day I went to get my hair done. I rang my sisters and was like, listen, I'm going to potentially like quit my job, move somewhere with cheaper rent, and I'm just going to make it. Do you know what I mean? Because either it won't get made, which will be devastating, or someone will make it without me, which will be devastating. Sent this kick-off email to the BBC that was like, my dad was a working class man from Toxteth Kirby. What makes you think you're the right people to tell this story? Blah, 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 blah. And then spent from that Saturday till Monday morning being like, gonna hand my resignation in, like getting pure fired up. And then on Monday, the BBC emailed back and was like, nah, Sam, we want you like proper. Then I was like cagey for a couple of calls, but then in the end, they were like, no, we want you to tell it. Yeah. So he's going to hate this. But a lot of it did come down to him just being like, email them now. A good job he didn't email them now. But it had to been like, and you what? Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I think that's the nice thing about the story and all the stories, that there's like a million stories in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can they listen to it on Radio 4 then?
So, at the camera. It's on Radio 4, starts on the 3rd of August, Saturday mornings at 9.
Boss.
Thank you so much.
Nice one.
Up the Silver Fox, yeah. Oh, don't tell a cry.
We're in McGillen's in Philadelphia. Absolutely delighted to be here. It is a cracking pub. I've absolutely adored walking up and down the stairs. I had a look round, went to the bar downstairs a minute ago. John, it is an absolute belter here in Philadelphia. But I mean, they're not short of good pubs, but this is an excellent one.
No, we've been to some great ones, but these places really looked after us, so thanks a lot to them for that. We filmed here a couple of days ago and then struggled to find somewhere for here, and we were like, oh, we'll just go back to McGillen's because they couldn't have been more welcoming. We're in the quiet upstairs space at the moment, but downstairs is busy already.
Busy at 11:30 when I walked in.
Yeah, the Olympics is on, and yeah, it's a cracking old boozer.
Really is. It is the absolute business. Thank you to them, and thank you to everyone in Philadelphia. Made everyone so welcome. It's been the absolute business. It really, really has. Other bits and pieces, Lewis. The endo to go aspect. You mentioned it earlier on. You know, Szoboszlai getting in ahead of him last night. It felt a little bit to me like the manager just picked what he thought was his best 11 last night, and Szoboszlai getting in where he gets in is suggestive of something. You don't want to read too much into it. It's still just a pre-season game, but I do wonder whether or not Liverpool are making clear they're open to offers for Wataru Endo if anyone wants to make any.
Well, let's be clear. If Michael Edwards was in charge of the club this time last year, Endo would have been nowhere near signing. They would have never signed someone at that age range. And like I said at the start, I don't want to slate Endo because he's a very nice chap, and he is a good player. He's just not quite at the level for this Liverpool team, I don't think. Obviously, we know that Marseille made a bid of around 12 million a couple of weeks ago. That was rejected, and they've since signed 3 midfielders, so I think that one's a bit dead in the water. There's been a bit of suggestion that West Ham are keen as well, so that one might be one to watch in the coming weeks. But as we keep saying, I do think Liverpool need to improve in that area, and it was very telling that Endo wasn't starting last night because, you know, when you think of the players that aren't here, and the fact that Endo's still not getting in the team, it doesn't sit too well for him, really, does it, going forward?
I think I've been a bit surprised that people have sort of mooted that Endo will want to dig in and stay at Liverpool. On the one hand, it makes a lot of sense, but given his age, given the fact that he's at this point in his career, if there's any inkling that he's not fancied, he should want to go. He should want to go and play at this point in his career. So Liverpool gave him a 4-year deal, I think, when he signed. I think that in part was maybe to just recoup some money around this period if this happened. If 12 months down the line a bid came in, or like as transpired, the new manager's come in and maybe had another look and thought, well, this doesn't really suit what I'm going to do tactically. I think he's, you know, I wouldn't write him off. I think he surprised a lot of people last season. The weird thing about him is he looks like he plays better as a lone six. In that system, I think if you give him an area of the pitch to firefight in, he'll be made up with that, and he can get the ball in that area and just pop it off to players around him, move it in front of him. Putting him in this position, back to goal, double pivot, you know, building up from deep, being responsible with the ball. I do think that a lot of that is not what he is really, really good at and strong at, and so, you know, if A, there's a sense that he's not going to enjoy it, and B, the sense that he's not going to play, he himself should want to move.
Yeah, I think he'll be having conversations, you know, with the new manager and saying, well, how do you see me moving forward? And listen, we're making presumptions, and he was out the team yesterday, and everyone goes, oh, that's telling something. It might just be that, you know, he wants to have a look at something, and we might be looking too much into these things. It also might be that he sees him as important in particular games, and so it might be like, well, when we're playing against a team like Arsenal, and you know, I want to sort of play like this, but I see you know, being useful in this scenario, or off the bench when we want to do this, or you know, whatever it might be. There is going to be a lot of games next season as well, and so, you know, he will need replacing. You know, how easy and possible is that to do that? What are you able to get in for him to sort of put that towards it, and is it worthwhile? There'll be a lot of questions around it, really, and there's a lot, you know, we don't know because we're all just looking for clues, and listen, I understand that we're all the same, but I think for him, like Dan says, it's probably based a lot on what the manager's saying to him and what Slot's saying to him. And if he's saying, look, I can see how I use you in certain situations, and I think you'd be good here, then he might decide that's sort of enough. But if he's saying to him that, listen, I've got my type of midfielders that I want to play, I don't feel like that's you, so I'm unlikely to be able to use you too much, then I think he probably will go, well, listen, I've played for Liverpool. I probably never thought I would. You know, I've had this experience, and I'm quite happy to sort of, you know, say goodbye, cut me losses, and go and play week in, week out somewhere else. Because he certainly could.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a certain thing for me, Lewis, looking at the shape of it before getting to the general picture where it's hotting up, where, you know, I'm looking at it and I'm of the view, I really want them to, whatever happens with Gomez regardless almost, and that's possibly telling, get themselves another defender in. A couple of different types of that, but you can make an argument. I really want to get them a forward in who's like Gordon, if not actually Gordon. And then the other one, it does just sort of go either way. Do you want them to get another attacking midfielder, depending on whether you're going to use Szoboszlai, what the long-term plan is for that? Do you want to get them to get someone in who's going to be a deeper line midfielder? I noticed it was put about again that they like Adam Wharton. I mean, that's not a shock. I think anyone who's watched Adam Wharton likes Adam Wharton. But the idea that they like Adam Wharton, so he'd obviously be someone who come in deeper, at which point you think Szoboszlai gets more of his game time higher. There are still those questions, aren't there? For me, there's two quite clear profiles, or at least categories of players, and then there's the idea of a third one, which is maybe when the manager's made a couple of choices in terms of where he wants his players. That's what we're looking at now.
Well, that's the thing. Slot's inherited a very, very good team, and it might be a case that he wants a full season to look at them before making any mad signings. But that doesn't mean they are not. That's not to say they're not going to go into the window this next few weeks. But I do think they just need, as I keep saying, a midfielder to sort of improve that area. One thing I would say on that, no one seems to have discussed, is Ryan Gravenberch, where Slot might see him this season, because no one's really sure what his best position is, whether he's better in that deeper line role or, you know, getting box to box or even sitting behind the striker. He seems to be able to play in all three. So it'd be interesting to see what he does with him. And also Slot sort of hinted that he hasn't decided what Trent's best position is. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he goes to Trent when he gets back. You're a midfielder, mate. And, you know, if that was the case, they'd probably need another right back. So it's just, there's so many moving parts to this jigsaw. Hopefully within the next week or 2 weeks we should start to put a few in.
Do you think Gravenberch will play against United? Is that what you're hearing? Because he's obviously out here now. I saw him, you know, watching. You know, you said all the manager said, as far as I know, is he won't be involved against Arsenal. But it would be nice to see a little bit of him against United on Saturday, wouldn't it? Just see how he fits in.
I think he will. Yeah, I'm not definite. I think when you look at what happened with Jota, he got here later and then played the second game. So Gravenberch and Konate should feature against United on Saturday. Whether that's just 45 minutes or even just half an hour in the second half, I'm not too sure. But they're both back in training, so it'd be good to see what they're faring up, because Konate's one that we don't really discuss that much. How will he fit in under Slot? Is he good enough on the ball? Is he still too injury prone? He was quite good last season. I thought he had a really good season until the last few months when it all sort of fell apart for everyone a little bit. But them two, it'd be nice to see how they're settling in if they do play against United.
One of my takeaways from it as it stands, though, Dan, is we're saying we still don't know X, we still don't know Y. I've got a really strong sense the manager does. And there might still be one or two things he wants a final look at, but I think he's pretty close to having a very strong sense of what it is he actually thinks, what it is he actually wants, where he's up to, how he's assessing these players. That's my big takeaway from this little pre-season now. Just from the bits we've seen, I think he'll have real clarity of thought. He seems to have real clarity of thought in terms of what it is that he wants, and I'm pretty buoyed by that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it'd be interesting once we get everyone back to see who he sees as, you know, binary to a position, who he sees as more flexible. You know, Szoboszlai conversation versus, I don't know, where he sees Cody Gakpo, for example. And I think what I said before when we done review was, you know, we're going to have to assess this minute by minute over the season, and I think the manager will have more of a sense of what he wants and what his vision is and what he sort of feels he can get from certain players. But that doesn't mean that he won't have a look at certain things when he feels the time's there or that there's an opportunity. You know, I think the other thing, you know, we talk about Enzo and we don't really factor in players like Trey Naoni or Stefan Bajcetic, where they are, what their trajectory might be this season.
Even Tyler Morton.
Tyler Morton's a conversation, you know, so this will invariably look a lot clearer come the end of August, because we'll know what we're dealing with in terms of who's gone, who's in. But I think in terms of how the football looks, I think it's going to be a constant process of trying to analyse it to see what the manager's trying to do in certain places.
Yeah, I think that's massively the thing, and I think that's why Liverpool have waited. I think if they'd have come in and not thought they had enough players, I think they would have done something. Or even not just we haven't got enough players, but we haven't got enough players in this position. I think they've got enough. So I think they feel like they've got enough, and I probably agree with them when you look at it. I saw Phil Blundell tweeting before saying, you know, he's counted them because he's good like that, and it's like 23 first team players, and that's not even counting, you know, the likes of McConnell and Beck and people like that, Dans and a few played sort of last season really, and so it's even longer. So I think they've come in and gone, right, well, have we got enough? Have we got enough in each position? And if the answer to that is yes, and I think it looks like they think it is, it's okay, well, where do we need to improve? Where do we need to sort of kick on, and how can we kick on? I think that's why they're the decisions that they're making at the moment. I don't think they're just sort of sitting there and go, well, we've got enough players, so it's fine. I think what they're making decisions on, and they're having to do it as quickly as possible, is, okay, well, if we've got enough, yeah, but is there any skills shortage, or are they suitable to how the manager wants to play? And obviously the manager wants to sort of look at them first, but also crucially, where can we sort of get a little better? If we feel like this team and this squad at the moment is an 8 out of 10 in terms of, you know, for this particular coach, you know, how do we get it to 8.5, and how do we get it to 9? And that is tricky. But that's the challenge, and that's what they've been hired to do, and hopefully they can do that. We just love that. There's loads to be excited about this season. You know, coming out here, I'm really excited. You know, watching them, and you it's partly the players and how excited they are. So it got me sort of even more so, really. But you'd love to, you know, to go in even more so, and I think that comes from, you know, another good performance hopefully against Manchester United, but it does come through, you know, recruitment as well, and they're both. You can do both. You can coach well, and you can improve, and you can gel, and you can get better, but also you can go, do you know what, we quite like that player who plays wide left, but we feel like there's a better one out there, so we're going to do, you know, a bit of sort of trading and move a few things around to sort of get that, because we all want to give this new head coach every possibility of succeeding. You know, he seems like a good fella, he seems smart, like Lewis said before, you know, he's very active on the training ground, and everything that he's doing is sort of encouragement all there, and I think what he's got, and I think he thinks what he's got is really good. But for me, this window was, can it be even better? Can we give him even more, you know, to work with, and can we increase our chances of challenging for everything? And that's what it's all about.
It is what it's all about. Just quickly, Lewis, the general market's hotting up noticeably. West Ham busy. They were busy already. It's been interesting the number of attacking midfielders / wide players West Ham have bought, especially when you're Mohamed Kudus curious as I am. But Fulkrug and Somerville look as though they're lined up. Got Conor Gallagher looking like he's going to end up going to Atletico Madrid unless Spurs swoop is, I believe, the language that's used. And Pascal Gross to Dortmund is now done. I think that was long trailed that Gross was going to go to Dortmund. Just sort of looking around, it feels like the next 15 days will be pretty busy. It then wouldn't surprise me if it quietens again for 5 or 6 days, and then it becomes absolute chaos again at the very end. This is because of the summer tournaments. I think it's played a big part in all the other little changes that have gone on through the league. I think it's going to be really, really busy in terms of people looking to, as John said before, almost remould the squad going into next season. West Ham being a really good example with the new manager as well.
Yeah, well, I feel like because we're so engrossed in the Liverpool bubble on this trip, I probably missed quite a few big signings around the league. It's just like, probably watch Match of the Day on that first Saturday, and I'd be like, when did he go to them? But the Conor Gallagher one's interesting. I'm always a bit confused about why Chelsea are so keen to get rid of him. I know he's not amazing. I thought that the Euros he was actually quite average, but you know, homegrown lad. It's a bit of a shock that they're so.
They kept picking him and then trying to sell him, but they kept picking him, and it's not like they haven't got many players.
But West Ham are an interesting one, as you say. A couple of good signings. I don't know if they're actually confirmed or not yet. But
those two just lined up, but they've made a couple of other moves as well. West Ham prior to this point, so it's interesting. They've moved a lot. Villa have moved a lot. You know, you feel as though they've got real plans about what they're trying to achieve.
There's some really exciting teams in the sort of mid-table of the Prem this season, like you would say West Ham, and also Palace finished last season really, really well. And Brighton under this new manager as well hurt, so I know they've just lost Gross, but he seems to be a really good coach, so I think it'd be a really good watch, the Prem in general this season.
Will be indeed. Keep your eye on all of it as it's going all the way through. We'll have more Gutter for you. We'll have Friday nights as well. There was post-match pint. We popped that out for free as a video. Do check that out. The Pink was the business. Really, really good. Done late last night. Everything that you need on the tour. Review out tomorrow morning too. It is the Anfield Wrap. We are in Philadelphia. It is a pleasure to be in bars as good as this one. We'll see you soon.